The Vatican State is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, with billions of dollars in assets and over 5,000 real estate properties around the world. Its modern day history is tainted by numerous financial and sexual scandals, deaths, lies, document leaks, and blackmail. All revolves around one financial institution dedicated to manage the wealth of the Vatican. This is the story of the Vatican Bank. Before we start, hi, my name is Julia and this is Total AML. I'm a certified anti-money laundering specialist. In my day job, I help reporting entities with their anti-money laundering obligations, and in this channel, I talk about everything there is to know on anti-money laundering and money laundering. If you're interested in this topic, please consider subscribing to the channel, and now let's start from the beginning. For thousands of years, the Catholic Church ruled the majority of central Italy and a conglomerate of territories called the Papal States. In 1870, Italy was unified under the Kingdom of Italy. It absorbed the Papal States' territory into the new kingdom, except for a strip of land inside Rome. Eventually, the Vatican City was recognized in 1929 as a sovereign state by the Lateran Treaty, an international treaty between Pope Pius XI and the then Italian Prime Minister Benito Mussolini. The primary source of income of the Vatican State has been donations, but Pope Pius XII, the successor of Pius XI, considered that this was no longer sufficient, and in 1942 founded the Institute for the Works of Religion with the goal of investing the Vatican State's capitals and increasing its wealth. This makes the Institute for the Works of Religion a financial institution. However, it is not a private bank per se, as it does not really offer traditional banking services. It is often referred to as the Vatican Bank, and we will call it the Vatican Bank as well here for brevity. The Vatican Bank holds tens of thousands of accounts belonging to religious orders and private religious individuals, including the Pope. Initially, the Vatican Bank invested a lot in Italy because at the time, the Vatican State had a tax exemption in Italy. But this changed in 1968 when the Italian government revoked the tax-exempt status for the Vatican. As a consequence, the Vatican State owed millions of dollars in taxes to Italy. The then Pope Paul VI was not really impressed with the prospect of paying taxes, and he brought in the big guns, Michele Sindona, a mafia banker. Michele Sindona, a lawyer originally from Sicily, worked in the 1950s with the Italian-American mafia clan, the Gambino family, helping them launder the profits of the heroin empire. With the wealth Sindona accumulated by working with the Gambino family and other rich families, Sindona was able to acquire a number of Italian and international banks and businesses. Sindona had major stakes in Banco di Messina, Franklin National Bank of New York, and shares in Paramount Pictures Corporation, Mediterranean Holidays, and the Dominican sugar trade, just to name a few. Sindona got noticed by the Vatican intelligentsia, and he became friends with Pope Paul VI. The two men met numerous times, and the Vatican State became a substantial partners in Sindona's commercial and industrial empire. Another key figure was Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, president of the Vatican Bank at the time, who transferred part of the funds held with the Vatican Bank to Michele Sindona in the hope of making a profit. With the help of Michele Sindona, the Vatican Bank developed a tax evasion and money laundering scheme to still profit from the investment in Italy without paying taxes on them. In practice, the Vatican Bank developed a network of companies and other legal entities in tax havens such as Switzerland, Luxembourg, and Liberia. These entities were ultimately controlled by the Vatican State, but in paper they were not. To do so, the beneficial owners of these entities were either shell companies or individuals who were fronting for the Vatican State. To further facilitate tax evasion and money laundering, the bank accounts controlled by the Vatican were anonymous, meaning that instead of being connected to a person or an identity, they only had a number. This network of corporations owned the investment originally belonging to the Vatican State. In this way, the Vatican State could pay little to no taxes in the country where these entities had a residence, and then it could funnel back the profit to the Vatican Bank via donations, and donations are tax-free. These donations were all medium to low value transactions and often in cash, making it nearly impossible to verify the origin of the funds. At the time, the late 1960s and 1970s, we did not have global anti-money laundering standards that required financial institutions to know their customers, making it even easier for these entities to evade detection. In addition to that, because the so-called Vatican Bank was not a real bank, it was not subject to the standards and regulation that banks need to follow, making its finances even more secretive. For example, usually banks need to provide a transparent record of their financial performance. The Vatican Bank did not disclose any such information until 2013, 70 years after its foundation. Another change is that nowadays, truly anonymous bank accounts are not possible, and this is because of anti-money laundering legislation that require banks to verify the identity of the customer opening a bank account. Pope Paul VI died in 1978. He was sanctified in 2018 by Pope Francis. He is now known as Saint Paul VI. Sindona Empire started to crumble in the 1970s when his companies and banks were declared insolvent. He was initially imprisoned in the United States for financial crimes and later extradited to Italy as he was accused of the murder of lawyer Giorgio Ambrosiano, who was in charge of liquidating Sindona's companies after the bankruptcy. After digging into Sindona's criminal activities, Ambrosiano had given information to both the United States and Italian authorities, and because of that, he was killed. Sindona was found guilty of the murder, and 2 days after his sentence in Italy in 1986, Sindona was found dead by cyanide poisoning in his cell. It isn't clear if it was suicide or murder. With Sindona under investigation and later out of the picture, the Vatican Bank needed to find someone else to manage its finances, and Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, president of the Vatican Bank, started to work with Banco Ambrosiano. Banco Ambrosiano was founded in Milan at the end of the 19th century by a Catholic lawyer and banker, and it was created to institute a Catholic bank. In the 1980s, the Banco Ambrosiano was one of the largest private banks in Italy, and it was chaired by Roberto Calvi. Without the guidance of Sindona, who is at this point in prison in the United States, the Vatican Bank relies on Calvi's guidance and purchases a major quota in the Banco Ambrosiano. Paul Marcinkus and Roberto Calvi manage the Vatican State's wealth in a very similar way to what Sindona used to do, by using shell companies and fronting individuals to own the investments and to avoid taxation. In addition to that, allegedly, the Vatican States had funneled funds from the United States to the Polish trade union Solidarność, considered to be a cause of special interest for the then Pope John Paul II, a Polish national. It was later discovered that Roberto Calvi had extensive connections with the Italian mafia and with the Masonry. Sindona, imprisoned in the United States, started collaborating with the United States authorities. Because he had a great knowledge of the Vatican Bank's wealth management, he was able to provide a lot of useful information to both the United States and the Italian authorities on Banco Ambrosiano financial crimes. Following an investigation on Banco Ambrosiano, Roberto Calvi was arrested, and while on probation in 1982, he fled to London and was later found dead, hanged under a bridge, in what is speculated to be a murder disguised as a suicide. The leading theory is that because Calvi started to collaborate with the authorities, his former associates needed to silence him. Italy requested the extradition of Paul Marcinkus for financial crimes, but the Vatican State never released Marcinkus to Italian authorities, and he spent a few years without leaving the Vatican State. Eventually, the request for extradition lapsed, and in 1919, Paul Marcinkus was able to return to the United States, where he was originally from, where he died in 2006. Pope John Paul II was made aware of Paul Marcinkus' behavior but refused to act. And actually, during this time, he promoted Marcinkus from bishop to archbishop. Pope Paul II died in 2005, and he was sanctified in 2014 by Pope Francis. He is now known as Saint John Paul II. The Vatican State publicly denied any wrongdoing by Marcinkus or the Vatican Bank, but still agreed to pay $224 million to the Banco Ambrosiano creditors, quoting a recognition of moral involvement in the Banco Ambrosiano collapse. After Archbishop Marcinkus stepped down as head of the Vatican Bank, the Vatican turned over its management to a board of lay financial experts. Lay as in not religious people, not priests, just normal civilians. New information started to leak from the Vatican in 2000 and forward. Of particular relevance was the book Vaticano SCPA, published in 2009, where the author Gianluigi Nuzzi published his research on the Vatican's financial and sexual crimes through the use of secret documents from inside the Vatican. The book provides evidence of what happened through the second half of the 20th century, pretty much about all we discussed in this video so far. Because of these reasons, the Vatican State shrugged off the accusation, saying that these were practices of the past and no longer relevant. The Vatican State was soon disproved by another document leak from inside, known as the Vati Leaks. In 2012, Pope Benedict XVI's personal butler, Paolo Gabriele, stole and released to the media secret documents revealing that the Vatican Bank did not comply with international anti-money laundering standards and unveiling corruption within the Vatican State. Pope Benedict XVI ordered an internal review to a commission of cardinals, which unveiled further sexual scandals and in particular several cases of gay priests blackmailed by people outside of the Vatican. Amid this chaos, the Vatican State did what any other business would do. They changed the CEO. Pope Benedict XVI retired from his role as Pope and became Pope Emeritus. This was quite extraordinary, as he was the first Pope to resign in 600 years, as usually Pope dies in office. Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI died in 2022. He has not been made saint yet. Paolo Gabriele, the butler that leaked the documents, was sentenced to 18 months, but he was later pardoned and he only spent a few weeks in prison. The election of Pope Francis XIII has been saluted by many as a breath of fresh air in the Catholic Church. First non-European Pope, the first Pope taking the name Francis, a symbol of poverty and humility like St. Francis, he is also praised for his casual way of talking and his progressive views. His nomination by God to the papacy has been a symbol of a new Catholic Church that has broken with the past sins of money laundering, sexual scandals, and financial crimes. Or at least for a couple of years. Another document leak, known as Vati Leaks 2, occurred in 2015, when two individuals inside the Vatican, Lucio Angel Vallejo Balda, a priest, and Francesca Immacolata Ciacchi, not a religious person but working within the Vatican institutions, have leaked evidence of financial mismanagement on the Vatican spending, especially lavish spending to fund some of the Catholic Church's highs-up, extravagant lifestyle, made possible by subtracting from donations otherwise intended for charitable purposes. Lucio Angel Vallejo Balda was sentenced to 18 months and later pardoned, and Francisca Immaculata Shaki was sentenced to 10 months, but her sentence was later suspended. Pope Francis has not died yet, but considering how things are going, I wouldn't be surprised if he was made a saint by the end of the century. The Vatican State has used typical money laundering schemes to evade taxes on millions of dollars in investments. To do so, the Vatican State needed to associate themselves with criminals, money launderers, and the mafia. People like Sindona and Carli have paid with their lives for their associations with the mafia, while the highest church authorities have been promoted or sanctified. Even more ludicrous, whistleblower like the Pope butler, the Spanish priest, and the Vatican worker have been sentenced for rendering a service to the public. I celebrate these people's bravery in putting their own lives in danger to unveil the truth about what happened behind the closed door of the Vatican State. Fortunately, many of the blatant ways in which the Vatican State hid its wealth in the second half of the 20th century had become progressively more and more obsolete. Money laundering is still possible where there is a will, there is a way, but it requires more subtle ways. I'm not convinced that Pope Francis is bringing much novelty to the Catholic Church in terms of moral doctrine. For example, the views he expressed on key societal issues like sexuality and women's rights are very similar to the position that the Catholic Church had for hundreds of years. Hate the sin, don't hate the sinner. He just presents his views in a much more charming way. But on the anti-money laundering side, it looks like things are changing. After Vatileaks 2, other money laundering and financial crimes have been unveiled, but not by whistleblowers, instead by Vatican's authorities. In addition, the Vatican State received a positive evaluation by Moneyval, the Council of Europe committee dedicated to anti-money laundering surveillance, showing that the Vatican State is making an effort to comply with international anti-money laundering standards. If you made it till here, thank you so much. There was a lot of scandals to go through. Comment, like, subscribe, the usual. It really helps the channel. I really enjoy reading your suggestions for stories, so please keep sending it to me in the comments. There are so many. It will take me a long time to go through all of them, but it's really helpful. Also, follow me on LinkedIn, where I post more about anti-money laundering. This is all for me now. My name is Julia from Total AML, and I'll see you on the next one.